and all is still go as we monitor our status for it. Good luck and Godspeed.
Have you ever had a premonition, a feeling that something dreadful was about to happen?
No, Mother, I have not been drinking.
Do you happen to have a pair of birds that are just friendly?
We all go a little mad sometimes.
I have to go back into the past once more, just once more.
This is HitchPod, a podcast counting down the 20 best movies of the wonderful 20th century director Alfred Hitchcock. I'm Kat Jones. With me is Dan Libke, and in this episode, we're comparing the 16th best Hitchcock movie, The Wrong Man, we've already podcasted about, and we're comparing that movie with the movie that the Oscars deemed to be the best one from that year. 1957 was the Oscars, and the movies were in 1956, and the movie is Around the World in 80 Days, the best picture.
Yes, but before we get to that, of course, we always like to give a cryptic clue to our next Hitchcock movie in the countdown. So the next one will be the 15th best movie, which we'll let you know at the end of the episode. But a little bit of a cryptic style clue to that movie. An escape, albeit of an unconventional kind, and that's 8 letters.
So one word, 8 letters.
Yes.
Which Hitchcock movie is that? We will let you know later on in the episode.
All right, but let's get into Around the World in 80 Days, which, as you mentioned, was from 1956. Has an IMDb rating of 6.7 out of 10 and a Rotten Tomatoes score of 70%, which is perhaps not as good as you might expect for a best picture.
Still feels generous.
It feels a little generous. Our old mate Bosley Crowther, he really liked this one.
Of course he did.
Yeah, he said it was a sprawling conglomeration of refined English comedy, giant screen travel panoramics, and slam bang keystone burlesque. So there you go.
He has a very specific kind of sense of humour, doesn't he?
He does. Anyway, it did win the Best Picture. It also won Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Cinematography, Colour, Best Film Editing, and Best Music Score. So lots of awards for that one. And you can watch it. You can stream it on Amazon or iTunes, wherever. Very easy to find. DVDs, Blu-rays, whatever. Stars David Niven as Phileas Fogg. Stars Cantine Flass as Passepartout. And Shirley MacLaine as Princess Aouda. The synopsis is, a Victorian Englishman bets that with the new steamships and railways he can circumnavigate the globe in 80 days. And it was written by James Poe and John Farrow and S.J. Perelman. They did the screenplay based on the Jules Verne novel. It was directed by Michael Anderson, and it is an adventure / comedy / family / romance.
/ betting movie.
Yes.
Is it a betting movie?
It is a betting movie. Well, one of the taglines was the global adventure that began on a bet.
Yeah.
And another good tagline that I liked was, it's a wonderful world if you'll only take the time to go around it. Not quite sure what that means, but it's a challenge for all the viewers in 1956.
I guess so.
All right, so we are about to spoil the plot of Around the World in 80 Days. If you haven't read the book or seen the movie, I guess you could go watch it if you really wanted to.
Is it a high concept? I mean, Around the World in 80 Days, is the entire plot in the title?
Pretty much, yeah. It's certainly the challenge of the plot, yeah. It's like, can he do this? I don't know, probably. I mean, you don't really set that kind of challenge for a story and then have them fail. But anyway. So the movie, it begins quite bizarrely with basically a lecture about the history of Jules Verne cinematic adaptations, and it goes all the way back to 1902's A Trip to the Moon. And so this person just tells us all about that movie for about, 10 minutes. And then suddenly we decide, all right, enough of that. We're going to segue into this movie, which starts at a gentleman's club in the late 19th century. And like most gentlemen's club, I think it's full of awful, rude men. These ones, like, they can't abide other people having touched their morning newspaper, or if someone puts ice in their drinks, it's just like, ghastly man, why are you doing that? And there's a cat in there, and they don't like that either. So they just don't like anything.
They were terrible.
Anyway, this is where we meet Phileas Fogg, who is David Niven playing himself. And Phileas Fogg is, they're talking about a recent bank robbery, and he suggests that he could travel around the world in 80 days, and this kind of conversation escalates into a bet against 4 other members of the club who clearly just want to be rid of him for 11 and a half weeks. So
we have no evidence this is the first time they've made this bet. Maybe they do it, 4 times a year, twice a year, get rid of him.
Anyone they don't get along with is like, can you get around the world in 80 days? I was like, oh, maybe. And off they go. They get disappear.
Yeah.
We also meet Fogg's butler. This is a gentleman's gentleman, as it's called. This is Passepartout. He's played by Cantinflas, who is a Mexican comedian of some kind.
And I thought he was also a Mexican bullfighter. So who knows what he is, but anyway.
He's something. Well, he's
something.
He's purportedly the comic relief of the movie. So past purportedly?
Yes. Yeah, I think so.
Anyway, the two of them drop everything and start their journey around the world. So there's some initial early obstacles and they're pretty much overcome by the purchase of a hot air balloon. I do kind of like, as the movie goes along, Fogg just, whenever there's a problem, he just spends money to buy something. I'm not sure he makes a profit on this bet by the time he gets back.
No,
he does
maybe
spend
not.
a fortune to get doing all this stuff.
And this kind of backs up the subplot of why is he spending so much money? Oh, maybe he's come into money recently.
Anyway, so the pair, are in this hot air balloon. They float over mountains and they land in Spain. I think they land in Spain just so they can have this kind of interminable bullfighting sequence with Passepartout. Interminable, right?
Interminable. And we were laughing about how long it was. And then it went for another 20 minutes after that, after we started laughing about it.
Just kept going and going and going.
God.
It was dreadful. Anyway, while they're bullfighting and wasting a scandalous amount of time, given they've got to go around the world in just 80 days, back in London, Lloyd's is putting bets on whether Fogg could complete the circumnavigation in
Is
time.
an insurance company allowed to do that?
I think so. I think Lloyd's of London was betting on everything in those days. Pretty sure.
Why not?
Anyway, the police, as you mentioned, have also begun to suspect that Fogg was the bank robber, and they send an inspector. This is Inspector Fix, and he's sent off to catch up with Fogg and arrest him as soon as he lands in one of the tens of thousands of British territories that existed at the time.
Is this an assignment of a lifetime? Like
Probably.
sending you around the world in the same number of days?
Yeah, so he just catches up with Fogg. He joins him in India, and he's about to arrest Fogg there, but the warrant for Fogg's arrest is delayed because the British consulate needs to break for tea. Classical, a bit of British nonsense there. Passepartout, meanwhile, he's trying out bullfighting techniques on a local bull, which is culturally insensitive and it upsets the locals, and he's chased onto a departing train and off they shoot. They're headed off to Calcutta. Passepartout's pretty useless for most of the like he's easily distracted. Like he's distracted by every woman that goes past. He's that's one of his comic characteristics. He turns and looks at pretty women all the time. Yeah, very fun. The train, which is taking them to Calcutta, as it was known at the time, doesn't actually go all the way there. It just stops in the middle of the jungle somewhere. This doesn't really stop Phileas Fogg and group. They get out. They basically just start chopping their way through the jungle to get to the next city. And this is where they bump into the princess. This is Shirley MacLaine, and she's about to be burnt alive by some savage natives. And they rescue her. Passepartout is actually the one who does all the rescuing, but Fogg gets all the credit for it somehow, presumably because he owns Passepartout.
That's what happened, back in those days.
Yep. Anyway, Fogg and the princess, they bond over their shared love of whist on the next leg of the journey.
Which the princess is pretending,
Yes,
of course.
yeah. But she's doing a good job, and he's easily fooled. So they're on their way to Hong Kong at this stage, and around about now is where Passepartout gets drugged somewhere, and he's thrown on a boat to Japan instead. And as soon as he arrives in Japan, he just heads off and joins the circus, as you do. But his kidnapping means that Fogg has missed his next boat, and this would be incredibly tense. But no, he just simply jumps on a different boat. And they arrive in Japan and they head straight to the circus.
Tension. How will they find How could they possibly find Passepartout in a whole country?
Yeah,
well,
they just go to the circus and he's there.
As you do.
Yep, so that's not a problem. And they all jump on a boat and off over the Pacific they go to San Francisco. And this is where we break for intermission. This is about 2 hours into the movie.
Yeah, this is a great point to break for intermission, of course, because we're going across the Pacific and it's a long way.
It is a long way, yep. And they've also pretty much all the major cameos of the movie, and this is a movie which is advertised with lots of cameos, are in the American portion of the movie, or a good chunk of them anyway. So you don't want to leave an intermission, as tempting as it might be. They arrive in San Francisco after the intermission, and there's a parade and an election of some kind, and Fogg enters a Wild West bar and he meets lots of these cameos. He meets Marlene Dietrich, Red Skelton, Frank Sinatra, all these other celebrities of the day.
And fair enough. I mean, they've been waiting a long time. This movie goes for a long time. Why not wait in a bar?
Yeah, exactly. So after they do that, they're off on a train across the United States. So they're just going to, basically travel from West Coast to East Coast. There's all kinds of delays on this train journey. There's peaceful Native Americans who you could tell they're peaceful because they smoke a peace pipe. The train is also delayed by some buffalo who are roaming across the tracks. They have to stop and watch that for a bit. There's a bridge that's apparently is too fragile to support a train, but nevertheless, despite this obvious engineering flaw, they convince the train conductor to just go straight across it, and he does, and then the bridge collapses immediately behind them. Then Fogg is somehow getting into a duel with some obnoxious cowboy, and just as this duel's about to take place, things get even crazier because non-peace pipe smoking Native Americans decide to attack.
Of course.
And so there's arrows and shooting and all kinds of chaos, and the train is out of control. And Passepartout does some stunt work. He climbs on top of the train and is kind of dodging arrows as they're being shot at him, and he saves the day somehow. I'm not entirely sure how.
No.
But he is captured for his trouble, and he's taken away to also be burnt at the stake. But before that can happen, here comes Fogg and the literal cavalry. They're here to rescue him, and they come in and they rescue him. And but as a result of this, they've missed their connecting train, which of course is more tension, very tense. But no, it's not that tense. They easily cobble together a train that's somehow powered by a sail, and they get the wind basically just blows them all the way to New York. I'm not quite sure how feasible that is, but that's what they do. They arrive in New York, and then once again, they're too late. They've missed their connecting steamer that will take them across the Atlantic back to England. And very tense again, except, of course, they just book another boat. And it's scheduled to sail to Venezuela, this boat, but instead Fogg just pays the captain and they go to England instead. And halfway across the Atlantic, the ship starts running out of fuel. Fogg just buys the ship. He says, all right, I'll just buy this ship off you, start chopping it into pieces and using all the lifeboats and everything as fuel for the ship. And they do so and, power it, and they just stagger safely back into England. But now that Fogg is back on English soil, he's arrested by Inspector Fix for the bank robbery.
And we find out it is the 80th day. I mean, who knew? We didn't know at any point during the movie what day we were up to.
Yep. So it is the 80th day. He's arrested. He's thrown in jail overnight, which means he misses his deadline. But it turns out that Fogg is the wrong man. They discover that actually the bank robbery, and presumably Inspector Fix just didn't know about this. They caught the bank robber at some point during the preceding 80 days while he was travelling around the world. So they let Fogg out, but it is now, of course, too late for Fogg to win the bet. But despite losing it, he decides to marry the princess, and he sends Passepartout off to organise an instant wedding. No mucking about, let's just get married today. And that's when Passepartout discovers that they're a day off in their calculations. And this is because, of course, the international date line. So they were tracking it studiously, but they forgot to subtract a day when they crossed the date line. And there is still time to win the bet, and so they do. They scurry off to the club, and they arrive with seconds to spare, and that's the end of the movie.
Wow, and we were absolute heroes for making it through there. And as you were retelling it, I thought, yep, it's pretty boring even on the retelling.
Yep, yeah, anyway.
What did you think of this movie?
Well, as we kind of alluded to in the retelling, it's not as tense as it should be, right?
No, it should be incredibly tense. He's on a ticking clock. Very unlikely that he'll ever make it, and instead he kind of just buys his way around the world. Yeah. So, yes, exactly. I mean, it does have the ticking clock. You should know at all times during this movie. You should know, all right, he's on well, he should be behind schedule at all times. He should be racing the clock at all times, trying to get somewhere. You should always know, how long he's got to get somewhere, and you should always feel nervous and tense that, oh my God, he's not going to make it. No sense of that at all. It's just him wandering around, doing dry British quips and also engaging in every cultural stereotype you could possibly imagine. I mean, it has not aged well.
No.
All those cliched stops are a colonialist nightmare.
Yep.
It's a British man travels the world. Here are all the places that we invaded.
Yes.
And the cultural stereotypes were cringy.
Yeah, yes.
Anyway, there was no expense spared on the Phileas Fogg journey or on the movie.
No, it was very impressive. I did have a vague memory from the book that he had to cross the equator at some point, but that doesn't seem to be the case because he never does in this journey. And I checked, I looked up the book journey as well, and he didn't have to do it. So
that's pretty easy.
Just go straight up to the North Pole, do a little lap, and come straight back down.
It would have been easy. Yeah.
I think the furthest south he gets is Mumbai or Bombay at the time.
Well, in those days, you had to travel around the world. You had to go to British territory the whole way around.
Pretty much,
right?
yeah.
So then maybe that was why.
Yes.
The amount of money he was set to win, $20 £100,000, I think, is about $3 million US in current money.
So decent bet.
Decent bet. Definitely decent bet. But, I mean, most of those action sequences, like the bullfight and the rescue of Aouda, feel pretty boring, really. They didn't really cause any tension or any sort of... You never really felt like anyone was in peril.
No, I can't think of a single scene where I felt there was any peril at all. Considering people being burnt at the stake twice in the movie, very strange.
The subplot of the bank robbery had a lot of good potential in it, and which is one of the reasons why the book is so good, right?
Yeah.
But, it is very long. I mean, the 3 hours, really feels like 3 hours.
Well, we out of the 5 Oscar movies we've watched now, the Best Picture Oscar movies, 3 out of the 5 have been 3 hours long. It's too long for any movie, really.
Yeah.
But especially this one, I feel.
It felt like it was unfolding
felt like 80 days.
Felt like it was unfolding in real time.
Yes.
That's for sure.
Yes.
But the book itself is pretty snappy, right? It's a short,
think so,
it's a novella. It's a short book.
Yep.
Anyway, and the book probably would take less time to read than the movie.
I could definitely read this book faster than the movie. That's what we should have done. We should have read the book and watched the movie at the same time and seen who was ahead at each point. Yeah. That would have added tension to
that would have added a lot of tension. One of us reads, the other one watches.
Yeah.
If you haven't yet watched this movie,
read the book.
Read the book. One person to read it in your family and the other person to watch it. There were a couple of things I liked. I did like the impossible aristocracy at the Reform Club and the contrast between the travels of the aristocrat versus the guys back home putting the bets on and, just not even really caring if he won or lost the bet. I mean, they could afford it. Why did they care?
Yeah.
That was a bit of a contrast. But the worst thing was possibly the prologue. What's even the point of that?
That was very strange, yeah. Oh. So... Yeah, I can't even begin to guess what the point of that was. It
wasn't even related to the topic. The only thing that was related was the fact that they mentioned Jules Verne. But other than that, it was irrelevant talking about rockets, and it was crazy.
Yeah, that was kind of strange. They did have, as we mentioned, loads and loads and loads of cameos in this movie, which was kind of rare at the time, apparently.
So that's right.
That was a big deal. So just going through some of them, there were like dozens of them. John Gielgud, Noel Coward, Peter Lorre, Cesar Romero, Red Skelton, Marlene Dietrich, Frank Sinatra, Buster Keaton, John Carradine, dozens of others. There was promotional material released at the time. The Screen Actors Guild representative was basically looking at the shooting call sheet and crying, "Good heavens, you've made extras out of all the stars in Hollywood." So, yeah.
I think there's an allegation that this was a film where the phrase cameo was coined. So that would be really to describe a brief appearance by a very famous person. That's possible. But I was wondering afterwards how many of these 44 cameo stars were voting members of the Academy. It seems like a really good strategy.
It would explain a lot, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
There's a review from Time Out. It's not a review of the time, it's a review from 2012, where this movie's called an interminable travelogue interspersed with sketches in which star spotting affords some relief.
Yep.
So that's pretty crazy.
It did kind of remind me of, the old Batman TV show where like a celebrity would appear. Like I expected any of these to be villains at any moment and like try and capture them and tie them to put them in an improbable death trap that he'd have to use his utility belt to escape.
Yeah.
But, yes.
No, they were all fairly innocuous cameos. And then, but the cameos did mean that we had a wonderful post-credit scene by Saul Bass.
Yes.
And that was a fantastic credit. The credits of all the cameos were showing where they appeared in the movie in real time.
Yeah, it was like a little cartoon, right?
Yeah, it was wonderful.
Yeah, it was very good. Easily the best part of the movie, I think.
Oh, yeah, definitely, for sure. How did it win Best Picture? I mean, it's really hard to really think about why it might have won. Although, I mean, there are dubious criteria now, right? You can play anyone with a disability and you win Best Picture or Best Actor. But it won, 4 other awards as well. Some people said you need a lot of imagination or time travel to know what was it about this movie that they gave Oscar for the biggest picture.
Yeah, I think I kind of get the sense of that. Yeah. We'll go through some of like the amount of extras they needed and like the scope of the filming and all that kind of stuff. We'll do that shortly. But yeah, I get that kind of sense that it was big and cost a lot of money to make and
it's colourful.
There
were a lot of point of view shots,
quite a project,
but it felt very bloated, didn't it? With all of those locations and stars and extras and so on. It was so slow and so many men. It was just men, as it was back in the day.
Yes,
and the best film editing. I mean, really, out of all of them, it felt like the editor just went to sleep. I don't know. Maybe it got bonus points for a light touch, but it felt like nothing was left out. Like nothing was edited out.
Well, I'm sure the editor basically copy pasted the bullfighting sequence. He just kept, all right, let's throw some more of that in there. Let's get a different angle. Let's do that again.
Let's put every single angle we took into this. Yeah, I think that's incredible. And the comic relief, that was just a bit of slapstick and some sleazing on women.
Yeah.
And Passepartout, by the way, the literal definition of that name is master key.
Okay.
In French. He was a terrible comic sidekick, wasn't he?
Yeah, I assume it was hilarious at the time. I find that challenging to believe to modernise. But anyway, David Niven did say that Fog was his favourite role. He did say at the time that he would have played it for nothing. He actually said that to the producers.
After he'd been paid, presumably.
No, he said it beforehand, and then he said, well, thankfully they didn't hold me to that. But the producers were trying to get Cary Grant to play it, which would have been a very different role. I think David Niven's he didn't act. He just played himself,
he
right?
He never acts. He's always the same role as ever.
But imagine Cary Grant in this role.
It would have been good.
Well, it would have been strange, right? Has Cary Grant ever done British?
I think it would have been great. I think it would have been perfect.
Funny. Yeah.
So the director Anderson he just directed some other epic movies like Dam Busters, right?
The Dam Busters was this epic war film. It was about blowing up a dam so they could win the war or something. That was released a year earlier, so he'd done that, and that was a pretty big film. He'd also done a version of 1984. So he had some kind of experience in both making epic movies with big casts and also adaptations of books. So I guess that was part of it. But the other kind of main contributor was the producer, Michael Todd. He'd produced a stage version of Around the World in 80 Days on Broadway. So this was his first film, but he was teaming up to do this one.
Imagine going all around the world, because they filmed on location, right?
Primarily, yeah.
When you've been in a stage previously, and now let's go around the world and do this.
Well, yeah, they allegedly filmed in all the countries portrayed in the movie. I'm not... That seems kind of impossible to believe, but I guess it's true.
There was lengthy time following the gaze of the characters as they moved around the world, right? We saw a lot from their point of view and how they felt sitting on the train for hours at a time.
Yeah. and we did speculate that maybe that was part of the appeal of the movie at the time, that, you were able to see all these different countries, which, in 1956, not quite so easy perhaps to go visit.
A lot of people would have done zero travelling at that point, particularly in another country.
Yeah. Massive cast, massive use of extras, I guess. So not just the cameos, like you got the main cast, you got all these cameos, the extras. Basically, there was 70,000 people shot in this movie in some fashion, including extras.
Oh, I bet you very few of them were paid.
Yeah, well, there were 10,000 for the bullfight, which was basically just an entire town. They just said, "Come watch a bullfight," I guess.
Yeah, get this bullfight for free.
Yeah.
How many animals?
About 8,000 animals apparently.
Oh, wow.
So that includes, all the buffalo and all the whatever. But yes,
there was a lot of time looking at animals from trains.
Yes,
I think exotic animals like elephants and buffalo. And
the
music was also pretty big. And the main song, the song by Victor Young, is absolutely gorgeous. Around the World in 80 Days, and that was a big hit at the time. And then on and on and on, like Bing Crosby recorded it and a whole bunch of people recorded it later, and it was a hit every time.
Yep.
But other than that, it was just very stereotype music.
Well, it was like Rule Britannia was the ongoing theme every time he did something British and wonderful.
La Cucaracha, it was just terrible. And then, I don't know, whatever that American Cowboys and Indians song is.
Yeah.
So they basically did the standard music that you would predict.
Yes. What about best lines of the movie? I've got
a few.
There were a couple that actually made me laugh. I think the first one that actually got me to laugh out loud was they were trying to work out how to rescue the princess, and one of their buddies on this particular leg of the journey was Sir Francis, and he had some kind of military experience, and he gave this detailed plan to Fogg and Passepartout of, we can do a pincer movement here, and we can do all these kind of elaborate schemes to rescue her. And then he finished off with, "There is only one problem. This plan can't possibly work with less than 75 men."
Yeah, that was good.
So that was funny.
That was great.
Yes.
The some of the lines that the princess had were quite good too. to. Like one of the times when Phileas Fogg said, "Would you care to hear about the time I drew a flush hand in diamonds?" Because all he talked about was cards.
Yep.
And then she replied with, "If you would care to confide in me." Which is great.
Yeah, one of my favourite lines was also when they were discussing the card games, and at one point he just goes, "I had no idea you were so keen about whist." That was their burgeoning romance based on card games.
The romance was not convincing.
It was non-existent. Yeah,
it was not supposed to be convincing.
No.
But anyway, I also had a couple of others. After Fogg was released from prison towards the end, he says to Inspector Fix, Detective Fix, "Now that we've cleared that up, I feel I can tell you I never really enjoyed your company and you play an abominable game of whist." As if that's the biggest crime ever.
Yep, that was very, very bad.
And then some terrible pompous aristocrat at the end said, "Great Caesar's ghost, no woman has ever set foot in the club." And Princess says, "Why not?" And he said, "It could spell the end of the British Empire."
Well, the end of this movie at least, so that's good. The Bechdel test. Does this one pass? Needs to have at least 2 named women in it. It fails at the first set.
All of those named women who were all in the club. No, there was no one in the club.
Yep, so
fails dismally. I mean, Shirley MacLaine barely gets a line.
Yep.
She, of course, was discovered by Hitchcock in The Trouble with Harry. This was her 3rd movie. Mm-hmm. She was wasted in this. She's such a brilliant actor, and she's just miscast. She's miscast as an Indian for starters, and as royalty. I mean, her whole shtick was I'm an unconventional woman, and it was just awful. She's almost unrecognisable, really. Her whole performance is kind of shy and confused and kind of, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
Probably is she's regretting being in this movie. It's the film's worst performance, probably. It kind of, I don't know how you can be worse than Niven, but you are. And it just kind of buries her in every single shot. She's kind of there in the background, barely visible.
Yeah.
It's just awful.
Well, she doesn't, there's nothing for her to do. She's just like following around. I'm not sure there's anything that she has to do in the entire movie, really, right?
Yeah. When they first point her out, she's there someone said online, she's there in the background of that shot where they're burying her husband and she's going to get buried alive with him or whatever, or burnt with him. And she's just in the back of all of these shots, and you don't even get a close-up of her for about 15 minutes. It's like not even bothering to make a good judgment about the beauty in the movie.
Yeah. Yes. What about modern technology? How would modern technology impact or improve or change the plot? And we're going to rule out like modern travel technology.
That's right. We could do Round the World in 80 hours, and there'd probably be a fair amount of tension, just like The Amazing Race.
Yes. Yes.
We know there's better tension, in fact, in The Amazing Race.
There is. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's edited much
tighter,
sharply. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean that was a problem even in 1956 when they made this one. So we're going to focus on non-travel technology. The first one I've got is I think the betting odds website would be vastly improved if they had like real-time GPS tracking of Fogg so they could see exactly where he was at all times. It's like, oh my God, let's update the odds. It'd be much more exciting.
That's right. And they did update the odds. So they must have had word back at different times about where he was at different moments.
Getting telegrams, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yes.
And of course there's no more British colonies, so that would make a little bit difficult to follow this subplot of trying to arrest Fogg.
Yep. Yeah, so I mean, there's no real point of him getting on the train in the first place. He should just wait back in England for him to return, which is effectively what he did. He just went round there, and as soon as he got back to England, then he arrested him. Yeah. So I guess there were no extradition orders in those days. I think you could use that in modern times. You just say, well, let's get him out there and bring him back.
Indeed. And it'd be much better if he tells everyone, I'm going around the world in 80 days, and he just never comes back. Yeah. Yes. If he'd really stolen the money, that would have been what he did.
Well, they kind of thought he was doing that at the end, right? Because he got on a steamer allegedly to Venezuela and they thought, he's finally doing it. Yeah. But no, he's boarded on his way back to England.
Now that I think about it, the money travelled around in some kind of, bag or rather, like a tartan bag. And there was no tension at all involved in the money bag. Yeah. Like there could have been a lot of tension with Passepartout regularly losing it. Or...
I thought he would, because they made a big deal. It was like, don't take your eye off this. And he's already established as this guy who can't focus on anything for more than a second if a pretty girl wanders by.
Yeah, it was Chekhov's bag and then nothing happened to it.
Yep. Yes, I forgot about that. Yeah. And I guess the only other piece of technology it would be, I was going to say that if they all had mobile phones, then once Passepartout was separated and lost in Japan, they could have called him and found him quicker. But I'm not sure they could have found him any quicker than what they did.
No, they found him much faster than a mobile phone. By the time you change the SIM card, they've actually got him a lot quicker.
Yeah. So that's very good. What about tributes, homages, remakes?
Well, it feels like this has been remade a number of times. Was there a TV show?
Yeah, there was a TV show. So there's several other movie and TV adaptations. There was a 1989 TV miniseries, which I remember reasonably vividly, probably just because it was advertised as, having Pierce Brosnan as Phileas Fogg and Eric Idle as Passepartout, which I think kind of caught my eye at the time, but I've never watched it. There was also, speaking of former Monty Python members, Michael Palin did a documentary TV series which he basically tried to emulate Fogg's journey.
Oh, yes, that's vaguely familiar.
And
that'd be much more fun to watch.
Yeah, he used only forms of travel that existed at the time of the book.
Yeah, right.
So, basically, and spoiler, he also was able to go around the world in 80 days. He did make a big deal, I seem to recall, of once he passed the international dateline of saying, all right, we're not going to make the same mistake. We're taking a day off here. Yep. Yeah, so and I think the book was reasonably faithful. As I mentioned, I did read it when I was much younger, like 40 years ago or something.
And the romance was still in there, right?
Yeah, most of it was from I think the balloon ride was made up for the movie, and I think that's become like one of the most popular memes of the movie. So people think of the balloon ride now as kind of an integral part of the story. Yeah. But it wasn't in the original book. It was just part of this movie. What about the Oscar movie cinematic universe?
That would require me to remember which other Oscar movies we've... the only one I can remember is Wings, since we like that one so much. But we did... So a number of the other movies we've already seen. You Can't Take It With You, The Godfather, The Lost Weekend. Yeah. So how could we fit Around the World in 80 Days? I mean, there has to be some kind of aerial theme here, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think the most obvious way to link it is to say one of these Wings pilots was inspired by tales of Fogg's balloon ride. Thought, I want to be up in the sky flying over the Alps, wherever they were flying. So, yeah, I'm not sure the timeline works perfectly for that, but it's close enough for our purposes. All right, the Hitchcock movie checklist.
Well, we know there's no MacGuffin in this movie, and also there's no cameo from the director.
No, he's apparently the only person alive in 1956 who wasn't in the movie, so yes.
Yep. And of course, with 10,000 people in the extras, how would you know if he even was? But there are plenty of, speaking of what Hitchcock likes, plenty of birds and animals.
Yeah, 8,000 of them.
Yeah. So, at one point, they ride on an ostrich.
Yeah, there's an ostrich ride, and bulls, and the cat, and buffalo, elephants, monkeys, all kinds of things.
Lots of animals.
What about a lead character at a standstill or on the run?
He's on the run. He's maybe robbed a bank, and he's definitely on the run as fast as he can possibly go.
Yep.
I think that classifies, and therefore maybe Hitch made a good decision though, never to do a movie version of this particular book. He didn't usually pick this kind of thing.
No.
Even though he liked travel.
Yeah. Yes. What about characters with elements of good and bad? Do we have any that qualify there?
Detective Fix, he was he was more a bumbling cop, but he was chasing Fogg, but he was also happy to accept his hospitality most of the time. It's like, if you're paying, I'm here, I'm buying.
Yeah, they seem quite chummy. They hang out, play whist together, and he's just waiting to get him back on British soil.
Again, zero tension with Passepartout and Princess Aoudou, I think both of them knowing that Fix was chasing Fogg, and there was no tension there either about will they tell him, won't they tell him. Like, there was just nothing made of it. Yeah,
very strange. What about the ordinary man or mistaken identity?
Yes, well, was Fogg the bank robber? I mean, it was very similar, really, to The Wrong Man, right? The real culprit was apprehended at the last minute. Someone resembling you was seen robbing a bank was one of the quotes. Yep. So that was why they thought it was Fogg. I guess partly because he had the money, but also someone resembling you. Yep. So similar to The Wrong Man.
Yes.
And I mean, I didn't like The Wrong Man at all, but I still think it was more worthy of Best Picture than this one.
Is the princess a smart young woman?
No, I don't think so.
I mean, she's young and a woman.
Yeah, it's close enough. Well, then she's
definitely
good at
whist.
I mean, we need to assume all young women are smart, so maybe that's accurate.
Yeah.
So is there any evidence she ever played whist?
I don't know. She's hanging around.
She would have picked it up pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Yes, but she would never have beaten fog.
No,
that wouldn't
that
have been
would
a
be-
thing that she did. Yeah. Ugh.
Terrible decor on him. Bumbling cops. We do have bumbling cops. We have so bumbling they cost Fogg the bet, or
they could,
almost
yeah.
cost him the bet.
Almost cost him the bet. It was Detective Fix. What other tropes have you got about from this movie?
Well, we've got from tvtropes.org, we've got Brits love tea. So obviously can't issue a warrant for the rest because it's tea time, and we love tea so much that we're going to stop our
And the
search for justice.
non-British version of that might have been we turn up somewhere and someone's having a siesta, but they didn't. They only put in the British version.
Yes, yes. I think there was another thing where he was on a boat at one point and there was like a storm and heavy waves and he still had a cup of tea brought to him so he
That's
could
right.
sip it on deck.
Yep.
Creative closing credits, as we mentioned. That was a good one. Follow That Car, which was subverted by Follow That Ostrich.
Follow
They
That
literally said Follow That Ostrich.
Yeah,
So that
that's
was a good
good.
one. And the other one, last one I've got here is Widescreen Shot, which is the movie starts on this very small little screen for the kind of lecture.
Yeah,
And then
that's
as soon as they decide, all right, now it's time for the movie, it kind of expands to the big widescreen. And so that's the last one. So now we get down to it. The Wrong Man versus Around the World in 80 Days.
Yes.
How could the Wrong Man have borrowed from Around the World to some Oscar juice?
Well, for starters, Manny should have gone on the run, right? That would have improved The Wrong Man and made it potentially Oscar-worthy.
He should have gone around the world in 80. He should have fled around the world.
Yep.
I mean, Hitchcock made a big mistake not convincing him to do that.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, we do have a couple of the awards that this one won that Hitchcock foolishly didn't even make himself eligible for.
Right.
So it won Best Cinematography Colour, and Hitchcock sillily
It's black and white.
shot it in black and white. And there also Best Adapted Screenplay, and he had an original screenplay.
Yes.
So completely messed up those two. So you can't learn much about those ones.
Yeah.
I think Hitchcock, as we mentioned in The Wrong Man, he didn't have a cameo, but maybe he should have added hundreds more from random celebrities.
Yes.
He knew most of the ones in this movie, so
That's right.
he could have got them and just thrown them in there. So
Yeah.
big oversight.
Yeah.
I think he should have also started this movie with a lecture based on one of his earlier movies. So he should have said, all right, here's The Lodger, and just showed scenes from The Lodger before expanding out into The Wrong Man.
Yeah, that'd be perfect.
Yeah, so I think they're the kind of lessons we can learn from for Hitchcock, from how he could have won the Oscar if he'd taken a few more lessons from Around the World in 80 Days.
That's right.
But which one did you prefer?
Oh, I definitely preferred The Wrong Man.
Yeah, as you mentioned, I don't think either of us loved The Wrong Man, but at least we didn't lose 3 hours while watching it. Right?
No. So we do apologise if you love Around the World in 80 Days or The Wrong Man.
Yes.
We didn't really love those stories and we don't pull any punches usually, but we did love the movie we've just watched for our Patreon podcast feed, and that was The Incredibles.
Yeah, so if you want to listen to us talk about a movie we actually liked, you can check out our Patreon, patreon.com/HitchPod, and the bonus episode on there is there. So,
Yes, so ranking. What out of the 5 Oscar-winning movies that we've watched so far, where do you rank Around the World?
well, I've got Godfather's my number 1, Wings is 2, You Can't Take It With You is number 3, Around the World in 80 Days slots in at number 4 ahead of The Lost Weekend.
Haha.
What about you?
So I have Wings at the top of mine, and then You Can't Take It With You and The Godfather, then The Lost Weekend, and then I'm putting Around the World in 80 Days last.
Dead last.
Dead last. I preferred The Lost Weekend. And that's saying something. We didn't like that one either.
Say something.
Look, if we watch 5 movies and The Godfather is somewhere in the middle, that is extraordinary.
Your dislike for The Godfather is impressive, but it's being won over by your dislike for some of
Yeah,
these other
that's right.
movies.
Look, it could end up third on my ranking of movies at this point, and I can't even remember You Can't Take It With You.
No.
What was that about?
Oh, that was the wacky family with all their wacky
that's
antics.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh no, I did enjoy that movie.
Yes. All right. So what's our next movie going to be then?
So we are decoding the cryptic clue in order to find out the 15th best Hitchcock movie as voted on by our listeners. The clue was an escape, albeit of an unconventional kind, 8 letters, and the answer is Lifeboat. And we will enjoy rewatching Lifeboat.
Yes.
So the way to get Lifeboat out of that, it's an anagram. And the anagram indicator is of an unconventional kind, which means the letters are all unconventionally scrambled. And that means that you scramble up the 2 previous words, albeit of. And if you scramble those up, you get lifeboat. And the clue, the first part, the an escape, That's a lifeboat.
Yep. So we will be rewatching Lifeboat from 1944. Originally, we both ranked it 23rd, so we were in agreement on this one. Just outside of our top 20s. But maybe it'll crack our top 20 on a rewatch. We'll see if we can find qualities that will bump it up a few notches, and we will let you know our thoughts on that next month. So if you have any questions or feedback on Lifeboat, you can email them in. That's feedback@hitchpodonline.com. And we will do our best to answer them in the next episode. We also, if possible, do a book club if there's a book associated with the movie. And now Lifeboat is based on a John Steinbeck story, but that story was unpublished. Steinbeck didn't like Hitchcock's version of the movie, and people have read the story, so you can find articles where people discuss the story, but it's very difficult to find the actual story itself.
Wow.
So it's a novella, apparently. It's longer than a short story, but not quite a novel. If anybody can find a published version of it, we will happily do a mini book club on it, but at the moment it seems very difficult to find, so we may have to give that a miss. But we will be doing another live post-viewing discussion of the movie with our patrons, and of course if you want to call us up and talk about that, or talk about anything, I mean, we're happy to have a chat about anything, feel free to sign up at patreon.com/HitchPod, and we will speak to you then.
Thank you for listening to HitchPod. Please come and talk to us on Twitter at HitchPodTweets, or on Facebook by searching for HitchPod. And you can also email us directly at feedback@hitchpodonline.com. And if you want more Hitchcock content, please consider becoming a HitchPod supporter. Just go to patreon.com/HitchPod. And for as little as $2 a month, you can get access to our Season 1 coverage of every single Hitchcock movie, as well as bonus episodes on Hitchcock-esque movies. Invitations also to watch live rewatches and much, much more.